Yesterday was the long-awaited return of Murder Drones with its 7th episode, the penultimate episode, with episode 8 being said to come out sometime this year, maybe still this spring even. Let's take a look at the latest episode, go over all the hidden details and big reveals, then talk about whether or not these were real answers or just the next link in a long chain of deception dating back to the very beginning of the story. Now, episode 5 had the reveal from the supposed Tessa that the humans had purposely given the Absolute Solver as a sort of infection to several experimental drones, most notable among them being Uzi's mother Nori and Doll's mother Yiva. Following this, the gang, leaving behind V, managed to get into the basement, where the supposed Tessa claimed to end that there would be a list of infected drone names that would need to be disposed of to prevent the spread of the Absolute Solver. In the basement, they will go on to find the mysterious underground church, which was used as a lab space for the intense experiments regarding Nori and Yiva. The Absolute Solver is of course like a demonic possession, but for robots. So in addition to the church itself, the workers have various religious themes as they perform what looks like an exorcism on Uzi's mother Nori. It is here that we learn that there is a special USB drive that can eject the Absolute Solver from a drone's body, a special program that was basically designed to overwrite the effects of the Absolute Solver in a USB shaped like a cross in order to keep with that exorcism theme. When Nori begins to have an Absolute Solver takeover, one of the workers are sent to get Yiva, who is hidden along with other drones, it would seem, in lockers where each of them are chained up. Yiva is let out to assist him, but when the worker first returns to the church, he actually leaves her outside. What he first sees inside is the site of some conflict that occurred while he was gone, but where Nori was seemingly defeated. The Absolute Solver, however, has the power to project holograms, and we quickly see that these are just illusions covering a much more brutal destruction, with Nori having escaped her chains. Like Uzi, Nori seemed to retain her personality early on in her interactions with the Absolute Solver, but as it corrupted her, she would fall entirely under its control, allowing Sin herself to have a new host, as she says. Watching all of these flashbacks is Uzi's mother Nori, whose recordings of the event are cut off just as Yiva is throwing the cross at her to fight off Sin's presence. Nori is not in her body anymore, but instead is in a strange little monster robot crab that is wandering the church, searching for answers just like the others, who have just slammed into that lower level as Nori is jumping into the giant pit that the Absolute Solver left behind. After the entire last episode being about trying to find the key to get into this basement, this entire episode of course focuses on exploring the basement before the inevitable jump into the hole that goes even deeper, but more on that later. Immediately after making it to the basement, En and Tessa scare Uzi into thinking they have some evil plans for her, and Uzi's Absolute Solver protects her and separates them from each other. Immediately, En finds himself pulled into some strange holograms from Sin, who plays with his emotions by taking the form of Maid-style V. While traveling the tunnels to the church, Uzi stumbles upon a giant pinup board with notes from the humans explaining a bit about the church, which is frequently called the lab space within the episode. The notes the humans leave behind on the walls and such are often more humorous and funny and a bit of a fourth wall breaker, and here we get that same energy, with the first note on the left saying, "We get the surface level irony of the church, but that it was the only space that they could find, and that it was just literally down here waiting for them." Now, that could be the writers telling us not to take the church location too seriously itself, that it was just a fun asset they had access to, and it worked for the changing of the visual themes from one episode to the next, as the show tries to explore new locations in every episode. In World, it could allude to there being a horrible secret surrounding the construction of the church, but if I had to guess, the jokes about it just being down here and the theme being surface level is just to express that we shouldn't dig too deep into the church itself having a history, and that it really is just a lab space as far as the plot is showing it. My headcanon for now is that the church was built as part of the first settlements of humans there, but that it ended up falling into the planet after mining had begun, for the humans to later use as their secret base to experiment with the Absolute Solver not so close to the surface. Another poster with a motivational thumbs up simply reminds the workers that the Absolute Solver is destroying everything they love. According to the supposed Tessa in the previous episode, the Sin Solver from Earth had destroyed the entire planet, killing everyone on it, and then it began to attack the other planets that had human settlements. According to one note on the board, there was only a limited time until some supposed cataclysmic event, so the humans likely felt really desperate in terms of finding a way to stop Sin, though it doesn't say if it was 87 days or years or what have you until the supposed event. It seems the goal of the humans was never to just use these solvers' powers for themselves, but to actually create the cure that they could use, not just against their own drones when they go too far, but to an invading version of the Absolute Solver as well. Uzi sees a notice about the experiments being done on her mom, realizing the answers to her family questions would be in the church, and thus she goes after them. N, meanwhile, is trying to escape Sin, who is masquerading as V at first to traumatize N some more, before revealing that she likes giving N's team their original personalities when sending them on missions, because she is always surprised by what they do as a result of it, even as it plays into her hand. To emphasize this, she gives N a memory back of him or another version of him, as we do know there are duplicates of him out there completing other missions. A memory where he is on Earth and eating the flesh of humans the way he and his team were eating the drones on Copper 9. This was the most horrific little flash in the show so far, showing us the real carnage of the shadowy humans being devoured entirely by N and his friends. This flashback revealed that the supposed Tessa had told the truth about the fate of the Earth, with it being even more horrible than we could imagine. After unleashing the disassembly drones on the humans and the strange eldritch monstrosities as well, Sin really did destroy the planet itself, just like in Tessa's photos, with what appears to be strange rips in the fabric of the universe, as we see with the null power of the Absolute Solver. As merciful as it would have been to simply rip the universe open and not have the people be tormented by flesh-eating robots first, this was likely something necessary for Sin's overall plans, the drones being necessary in helping to fight and distract humans, as she got the hardware necessary to pull off a big enough null explosion to destroy the planet entirely. Sin tries to assimilate N now that he has cleared the way to the church for her, but he is rescued by the crab version of Uzi's mother Nori, who wants him to take the cross to the surface to give to Khan to use against the Absolute Solver. Interestingly, Nori recognizes him as a disassembly drone and one that belongs to Sin, but does not recognize him as the one who killed her, despite saying that he does look familiar to her. We don't know how she ended up this way, but she was supposedly killed by a murder drone, and this seems to show that it was in fact N, though she of course did survive in this strange new form. Meanwhile, during all this, Tessa is going for what she had claimed to N she was really there for, the list of drone names who were infected with the Absolute Solver. Out of all the many names that exist in the lab's database, only 2 show up highlighted. These of course include Nori, whose status is set to in progress, and Yiva, who is said to have a patch update. The other names all say corrupted or no effect, indicating that they got no solver or became the Absolute Solver entirely. After getting this information, Tessa, as we can see in the reflection of her helmet, sets the system to purge and self-destruct. Interestingly, she had to take off her glove to use a fingerprint to show that she was human, but that didn't quite seem to be the truth by the end of the episode. But again, more on that later. Now, following this, Dahl attacks Tessa, demanding to know where the patch is, thus teaching us that the patch that Yiva had, according to the file, was in fact to stop the Absolute Solver from taking her over, with Nori still being just in progress all these years later. Tessa manages to escape, and we cut back to the flashback that we saw at the beginning of the episode to see what happened next. Yiva had used the power of the Absolute Solver to stop Nori and insert the cross into her to give her the patch update, which means the in progress she has even all these years later may be in progress because Nori seemed to throw the cross into the pit before it could completely purge the solver from her. Because of that, her arm had activated a null function which was going to cause massive destruction and take Nori with it, until Yiva used her powers to cut off Nori's arm and throw it down into the pit Nori had made as the Absolute Solver. The rest of the story came as an explanation from Nori herself to N, who explains that with the null being thrown into the pit, half the planet still blew up, leading to the end of human life and leaving behind only the drones. Nori claims to have woken up with her memory scrambled, and thus she didn't have all the information about what was to come, but more like trippy hallucinations about everything that she sort of kind of remembered distorted in her programming. She had enough memories, of course, to know that disassembly drones were coming for for them as seen in her artwork in this week's episode, as well as in episodes prior, but she doesn't really explain how she ended up in this new form after supposedly dying at the hands of a disassembly drone. Now, following all of this, Tessa targets Uzi herself, and though Uzi has her absolute solver powers, it scans Tessa's suit and says that it is a like object that she can't interact with using the absolute solver. This seems to confirm that whatever Tessa is at this point, she is working with the absolute solver, though that seemed pretty obvious from the get-go to me. Tessa nearly killed Uzi, but En stops her at the last second and gives her one chance to tell the truth about the patch, which he had just learned about from Nori. With the patch, Uzi should be able to cure herself, but Tessa had been pointing towards death being the only way to stop Uzi from destroying everything as the solver herself. Tessa doesn't even answer En's question, but instead begins to repeat what Sin said earlier in the episode, that there is a reason she keeps En around, once again pointing to her being aligned with Sin. En simply decapitates her, which was wild to see, but it gets weirder from here, but we will have to circle back to that. Following the supposed death of Tessa, we got the moment from the teaser for this episode which showed En and Uzi coming together, and En saying that he knows they need to get through this together. This was quite the ending after killing Tessa, who was trying to push En towards killing Uzi, just to have Uzi immediately turn to the absolute solver controlled by Sin again. It was shocking to see this sweet moment from the teaser that we'd all been waiting for turned on its head for this final battle, where Uzi's mother Nori would help fight her with her own absolute solver powers. It was in this moment that we also got to see the complexity of Sin's great plans. With the absolute solver virus slowly infecting drones, you would think that Sin could just sit back and wait for the solver protocol to take over entirely, but because of the small moments where she would take over a drone on Copper 9, such as Nori, she knew they were making a program that could destroy her. Especially with all the drones that now know about this, it's simply not safe for Sin to leave Copper 9 standing. Even just destroying the office and the direct drones involved would no longer be enough. Sending the disassembly drones and Tessa in was a very elaborate way to get into the lab, with Sin hoping she could get there and to the USB patch drive before anyone else could use it against her. But as we see, the first thing she does when she takes over Uzi is destroy the cross-shaped drive entirely, leaving no way to cure Uzi, let alone stopping Sin. Together, Nori and En fight against Uzi, and with some shenanigans are able to get Uzi to take control of her body again, though it's after some pretty awesome fights with cool null explosions ripping holes in reality. Now, after being shocked back into her own body and then throwing her mom into the pit, Tessa mysteriously stands back up without her head and retrieves her helmet, which had rolled away after En decapitated her, leaving plenty of blood. We know she had blood in her suit from the previous episode, which was used to keep sentinels away as they don't attack humans, but even Tessa seemed unsure if that would really work, as she didn't really seem to be human. The headless body of Tessa puts the helmet back on before ripping out of the suit entirely and leaving the helmet behind, to reveal that she's in fact a new version of Sin. This appears to be Sin, but wearing actual human skin, likely the real Tessa's skin, which means the blood in the suit was likely Tessa's as well, though the real Tessa is undoubtedly dead, and the suit was just a disguise for Sin to roleplay as Tessa. Sin, on some level, seems to want to be Tessa based on what we saw in episode 5, where she is shown playing with human dolls, seemingly imagining herself controlling real humans the way that the humans, and Tessa in particular, would control the drones. We have known since episode 4 that the Absolute Solver's powers that even Uzi had access to at that point can create biological organisms, often with tentacles, and this version of Sin seems to have those biological tentacles instead of the robot ones seen in previous episodes connected to its body. She seems to have believed that by creating some flesh and using Tessa's skin and blood in the suit, she could play as Tessa, who, like Sin, seemed to adore En to a strong degree. This was her sick, twisted roleplay to be the person she thought that En wanted, but it wasn't Tessa that En wanted in the end, it was Uzi. What's really grim is that in this scene, we can see that Sin kept Tessa's hands, which she continues to keep as she merges with the robotic corpse of Doll to use as part of her new body, those hands being necessary for things like fingerprints to prove that she is human, as we saw earlier. Finally, this Sin monster dives into the pit, trying to take Uzi and En with her, but Uzi ends up sacrificing herself to save En, thinking herself a lost cause and a puppet to the solver at this point, especially now that Sin has destroyed the patch. What Uzi was really hoping to accomplish in this moment is kind of hard to say. She falls into the pit, but when she wakes up, she is floating in space, looking at the destroyed remains of Copper 9, with the ringed Saturn-like planet still in the background. That was a dramatic cliffhanger for episode 7, with there being one more episode this season, the big finale of episode 8, and the show is of course expected to return for season 2 next year. I'll do a full video on the potential finale plot, but for now, I think it's possible that Uzi will come along to find En and perhaps others fine in the void of space. The drones don't have any reason to die in space, as they don't breathe the way humans do, and part of the reason Sin wanted to destroy all the drones before blowing the planet up might have been because the drones wouldn't really be destroyed by the full destruction of the planet, just as they managed to survive the first explosion when all the humans died. I have no idea where the episode would go from there, but with all these little bits of space rock, it's possible the entire colony of drones is fine, safe in their bunker and on the little bit of planet that it was situated on before the explosion. The show has been playing for a while now with the idea that the entire world is a simulation, and that the Absolute Solver is somehow messing with the code of the universe itself in order to create these little null explosions that seem to wipe away reality. And thus, I wouldn't be surprised if there are even bigger twists coming where it turns out that the explosion itself could be undone by the Absolute Solver's power as Uzi controls it. Maybe what we will end up seeing is a final episode where Uzi uses her power to fix everything and ends up destroying the Absolute Solver herself. But what do you guys think? This was perhaps the most intense episode yet, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the big ending, and beyond that, figuring out where the show could go for season 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button right now because our artist Aldo will be drawing some cool murder drones or drone cut art for you guys to see in our community tab. And we'll of course have videos all week breaking down these smaller moments in this huge game-changing episode. See you guys there.